Marco A. Rubio, Secretary of State of the United States.
Thank you, Mr. President, and all of you for convening here today on this important matter. When President Trump took office, he made it among his highest priorities the restoration of peace anywhere and everywhere in the world where the opportunity presented itself. And it's met with great success in a number of places. We had a conflict between India and Pakistan, which was a very dangerous conflict, and one that he chose to engage in and was able to bring it to be very involved in bringing it to a cessation of hostilities. When Thailand and Cambodia were engaged in hostilities, the president got involved over a weekend over in the United States, and were able to play a critical role in that regard as well. We are very grateful to some of the countries in this room that were helpful in that regard with the DRC and Rwanda, and work remains to be done. But again, a conflict that presents grave dangers and extraordinary humanitarian challenges. With Azerbaijan and Armenia as well. He has become involved, and we were able to sign an agreement at the White House very recently that hopefully prevents a future conflict which would prove costly and deadly. But the one that's proved to be an extraordinary challenge has been the war in Ukraine, between Russia and Ukraine. The President has worked on it tirelessly, has invested a tremendous amount of his own time, energy, and the highest levels of our government. We have had meetings in Turkey, meetings in Saudi Arabia, meetings in Alaska, countless phone calls, doing everything possible to bring this conflict to a resolution and to an end. A war that cannot end militarily. It will end at a negotiating table. That's where this war will end. But the longer it lasts, the more people will die, the more will be destroyed. Some of the numbers we are seeing in the loss of life among military personnel, for example, on the Russian Federation side, are staggering. Staggering. In 1 month alone, more loss of life than in the entirety of the U.S. engagement in Afghanistan or Iraq. This war has to end, and we have done everything we possibly can and will continue to do everything we possibly can to bring it to an end. Very generous offers have been made. For example, a ceasefire at the current lines of contact, while all the other details on the future of the conflict could be worked out in terms of future territorial lines. The President has shown extraordinary patience in terms of not assessing additional sanctions in the hopes of having a breakthrough in this regard. And all has come to what appears to be not just a stagnant one, but an era, and we've entered a period of what appears to be potential even escalation, with the historically highest number of strikes we've seen over the last few nights and before. And now we are also watching incursions into neighboring airspace by both drones and airplanes. The President is a very patient man. He's very committed to peace, but his patience is not infinite. And as he has said repeatedly, he has before him the opportunity and the options of imposing additional economic costs on the Russian Federation if necessary in order to bring this to an end. He also has before him the option, as he has already chosen to do in some circumstances, to sell defensive weaponry and potentially offensive weaponry so that Ukraine can defend itself from this assault by purchasing that weaponry. So I'm here to say to the Security Council, the United States remains as committed as it has ever been to a peaceful resolution to this dangerous conflict. But there will come a moment in which we will have to conclude that perhaps there is no interest in a peaceful resolution. And then the President has before him real options, which he intends to pursue, as he has made clear today in some of the messages he has put out. So I strongly urge the Security Council, the member states here, and those who are not part of this as well, to do everything in their power, and including the Russian Federation, to do everything within their power, and the Ukrainian side for that matter as well, but all sides, to bring this war to an end before it becomes something that will last another 3 or 4 years, lead to more destruction, both economic and at the same time a loss of life and loss of property and loss of futures. This war needs to end. But if it does not, if there is no path to peace in the short term, then the United States and President Donald J. Trump will take the steps necessary to impose costs for continued aggression. Thank you.
I thank His Excellency Mr. Rubio for the statement. I now give the floor to Her Excellency Mrs. Alexandra Papadopoulou, Deputy Minister for Foreign Affairs of Greece.
Thank you, Mr. President, and I would like to thank the Permanent Mission of the Republic of Korea to the UN for convening this meeting. At a time when the United Nations and its membership should celebrate the 8th anniversary of this organization's founding, the world faces multiple and severe crises, while many countries suffer from the scourge of war. Greece firmly believes that all crises could and should be averted through dialogue and diplomacy. Unfortunately, in the case of unprovoked Russia's war of aggression against Ukraine, this defied all diplomatic efforts and resulted in unprecedented loss of human life. For almost 4 years, Europe has experienced the most disastrous war in its territory since World War II. Greece has consistently backed all efforts to put an end to the war in Ukraine. We supported, along with the vast majority of the UN membership, relevant General Assembly resolutions. We assisted this fellow European country in its time of dire need. Above all, we joined our voice with other countries on the need for peace. Greece has welcomed the US-led initiatives and the decisive efforts to stop the bloodshed in Ukraine, firmly believing that the time for peace is long overdue. 3 direct rounds of negotiations between Ukraine and Russia have produced some results with regard to the exchange of prisoners and civilian detainees. Greece welcomes these agreements and their implementation and further calls on Russia to engage in goodwill in further negotiations. We regret that Russia has not yet agreed to a leaders' meeting and that it has shifted away from the path to peace, proceeding to reckless acts that affect EU and NATO borders. As a staunch proponent of international law and the UN Charter, Greece unequivocally condemns any violation of internationally recognized territory by land, air, or sea. Any change of borders as a result of the use of force is unacceptable and sets a dangerous precedent that could incite armed aggression and imitators elsewhere. We desire peace. As Thucydides has taught us, war is a choice, not an inevitability. We call on Russia to choose peace and cease hostilities. Our primary goal now should be a permanent, comprehensive, just and lasting peace settlement that will be fully in line with international law, the UN Charter, the General Assembly resolutions, and the Helsinki Final Act. As a non-permanent member of this Council, Greece stands ready to work in this direction. Lastly, Greece firmly believes that a peaceful resolution for Ukraine without Ukraine is not possible. We likewise view Europe and its nations as an integral part of any solution to end the war. Together with our European partners, we will continue to prioritize Ukrainian, in other words, European security. To that end, we stress that any future peace agreement should be founded on credible and robust security guarantees to preclude the recurrence of war and ensure an independent, democratic, and sovereign future for Ukraine. Thank you.
I thank Her Excellency, Mrs. Papadopoulou, for her statement. I now give the floor to His Excellency, Mr. Syed Tariq Fatemi, Special Assistant to the Prime Minister, Minister of State of Pakistan.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Secretary General. I thank the Secretary General for his insightful briefing. I echo his call for peace and the need to bring the protracted conflict in Ukraine to an end. I welcome the Presidents of Ukraine, Greece, France, and Slovenia, as well as the Foreign Ministers of US, UK, and Guyana to this meeting, and the Ministers and high-level representatives of other member states. Mr. President, the conflict in Ukraine has raged on for over 3.5 years. It has impacted the regional and international security landscape. Continued fighting has caused immense human suffering. The repercussions of this conflict extend far beyond its geographical expanse. Increased polarization and geopolitical tensions, disruption of supply chains, food and energy insecurity, global inflation, and much more the Global South has borne a disproportionate brunt of these consequences. Mr. President, we have consistently maintained that there is no military solution here or in the foreseeable future. Every bullet fired, every rocket and drone launched, every life lost moves us further away from peace. We call upon the parties to demonstrate restraint, scrupulously adhere to the international humanitarian law, and make meaningful strides towards de-escalation. Mr. President, given the complex historical context and the intricate nature of this conflict, the logic of singling out third countries and placing this blame elsewhere is not conducive to the pursuit of peace. Mr. President, a glimmer of hope did emerge at the start of the year to pursue the path of dialogue and diplomacy. The Security Council adopted Resolution 2774, mourning the tragic losses of life, reaffirming the Charter's principle to peacefully settle disputes, imploring a swift and end to the conflict, and urging a lasting peace between Ukraine and Russia. Pakistan supported this resolution. Pakistan also welcomed the ensuing political engagement, including direct talks between Russia and Ukraine, facilitated by the US President himself. It generated optimism for an early end to this conflict. We certainly hope that these efforts will bear fruit. Our collective priority must be to silence the guns and create conditions for a negotiated settlement. As an ardent advocate for peace and a firm believer in the power of dialogue and diplomacy, we will support all endeavors aimed at resolving the issue peacefully. That was also the spirit of Resolution 2788 adopted by the Council in July. Mr. President, the path of peace is the only responsible choice. A sincere and meaningful dialogue, which addresses the security concerns of all sides, is anchored in the principles of the UN Charter and international law, and respects the relevant multilateral agreements, can help secure peace, which is both just and sustainable. Pakistan will continue to support all regional and international efforts that pave the way for a peaceful resolution of this conflict. I thank you, sir.
I thank His Excellency Mr. Fatemi. Okay. So I thank His Excellency Mr. Fatemi for the statement. Thank you. I now give the floor to His Excellency Mr. Javier Martinez Achav Vasquez, Minister for Foreign Affairs of Panama.